your order. Let me recommend our special. And it's going like hotcakes. It's called nationality. And you'll love it.
Islam, and thank you for joining us. Moorish News 7, Blood on the Doorpost 3, Returning to Journalistic Integrity. Today, my guest in the studio is Grand Sheikh Loville, Islam Grand Sheikh.
Islam Sheikh is.
Welcome to the platform once again, Grand Sheikh. Thank you for joining us today, and I'd like to thank my team out there for assisting me. My sister, Fakai, and my brother, Voss. Thank you, Tamora. We're going to give you a show that's going to take you on different levels. We want to talk about that blood on the doorpost 3 because we understand, Grand Sheikh, Pharaoh had to look death in the face. And that last wrath that hit the heart chakras of everyone because it took the lives of all the firstborns, not just of the animals, but also of the human. Every human that had a firstborn child, even if it was the last child, they left that day. So we know that we're in a time, Grand Sheikh, whereas people are referring to people by names that allude to slavery, which is causing that blood to rise up to the horse's eyebrow. And this is what the Prophet Noble Drew Ali talked about. Grand Sheikh, Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought us the keys to our vast estate and our nationality as we are learning. And what I think the viewing audience and everyone wants to know is, who is pulling these strings to keep our people in this dead state, this state of mental slavery? And where are they? Now, I like to go into my program today talking about identifying who these individuals are that are causing the nation to lie in a rut, because by the Moors not referring to themselves by who they are, what it causes is a rift in the nations of the earth because the Moors are in the forefront. So what I want to ask you, Grand Sheikh, is we talked about who these individuals were before the show. We spoke briefly. Who are these individuals? Who is the media that's causing the people of the indigenous status of this land here in the present Moroccan Empire? Who is the mainstream media that's not allowing people to be called by names that their true names? Nationality is the order of the day. Let's talk about who the mainstream media is that's causing these problems, Grand Sheikh.
I rise giving praise to Allah, the Lord, governor, cherisher, sustainer, ruler of the world. I give a hail, high honor to all true and divine prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, True Ali. Islam, it's great to be here, Sheikhs. And the blood is definitely on the doorpost. The individuals that you speak of are the major media magnates who have invested billions, if not trillions of dollars to provide the annual avalanche of lies. What I see and characterize it is as one of the biggest Hollywood productions the Guinness World Book of Records has ever seen. They've been running this for several decades now, this false narrative of Moors who are indigenous to these lands here as being titled or designated as Negroes, blacks, coloreds, the dead badges of the law, which is the reason why you have these plagues. Now, when you go back to the divine warning that the prophet issued, he spoke about the greatest sin being a whole nation of people being removed from knowing who they are. This is why the diseases, earthquakes, things like COVID-19 have been unleashed on society.
Yes, speaking of COVID-19, today exactly, this is what's going on today in the world. Everyone is being required to wear a mask for your own protection. There's different strands of the COVID-19. Well, let's talk about the other characters involved. Who is the mainstream media? You talked about these European colonists that are telling the avalanche of lies, and we know that if our story is going to be told, it's going to have to be told by us because it's our story. Grand Sheik, who is the attorneys that are going into court pretending to represent a nation of people who are not even being identified by who they are? Who are these lawyers, attorneys? Who are these people
Well, let's
to
go into
us?
the Constitution, because when the prophet spoke about the Constitution being one of the greatest documents of all time, let us look at those who are designated as political figureheads, leaders within the community.
Who is the government,
The
in other
government,
words?
exactly, who the government is. Now, let's be clear, the government is supposed to be reflective of the people who are indigenous to that land. This false narrative that America was discovered. And, so this is where the annual avalanche of lies began. And then the false narrative that Europeans are founding fathers to a land that they're not indigenous to. So we have to understand that Allah sent the prophet to create the Moorish Science Temple of America to protect the land and to return the estate to those that it was set up for, the ills and the bays. So there was a creation of an entity, much like the Vatican, and this is prior to the Catholic Church creating their entity. So the Moorish Science Temple of America, through the divine guidance of the great God Allah, was set up to create an entity or a trust. It was set up as a trust to hold the estate until our people became mentally
Competent.
and
Yes.
sound to be able to take up that responsibility.
Well, Grand Sheik, it appears there's a lot of players, and this is why I got these "Who Are You" questions lined up. We're trying, and we know that we have law enforcement, and most of the times, does it appear that when a lot of the crime, the blood is being spilled in our neighborhoods, is from officers that are not of our same nationality? Who are the police officers, and who is the state that's perpetuating this? Who are these people?
Well, I find it interesting. There's a dynamic that's going on with regards to our people. I recall seeing a meme on a Facebook feed, and it showed pictures of our people who had been shot and killed by law enforcement, even though they did not present a threat to the public. It was as if they were criminalized because they were designated as black, right? And in the same token, we've seen individuals that have demonstrated the capabilities of mass destruction, harm to several individuals. I mean, shootings at schools, and they apprehend these Europeans without harming them. And I've seen situations where they go out of their way to, even after being harmed themselves, police officers will not harm the European threats. So I recall seeing, I believe it was this KKK member, skinhead. They had him handcuffed, and they were dealing with him humanely, giving him water, medical attention. Yet when it switched to how they were handling Asiatics, people that looked like us,
It was a different situation.
It was a different situation. There was very little time to react, and they just went to the kill. It was
I have a
always the
current
kill.
event for you. Speaking of different situations, Micaiah Bryant, I believe she's 15 years old, and this young lady actually called the police, and she called the police, and her life was taken as a result of that call. Now, there's always a lot of stories, and to really get down to the bottom, social media has provided us with cameras, the proof, and speaking of who are these people, the narrative that are being played out, it appears that a lot of people have been in place, as you mentioned, for decades. Grand Sheik, who are the teachers that are teaching our children? Who are the doctors that are working on our people? Who are the jurors and the judges? I feel that it's time that people want to know, because none of these people, it appears, are working for us. And then at the end of the day, we have to look at ourselves and ask the questions. Who are we? Are we truly who we say we are? Then we must begin to do the things that's going to make sense. We have to begin to make it make sense. But I want you to kind of go into, Grand Sheik, briefly, if you can, how it's talked about when you expose the devil and Shaitan, the demons, then they will flee. Let's talk about the works that's been done by the Moorish Science Temple of America for the last decades in federal and state court, from 2010 to the present.
Well,
because people need to know.
Before we can go into that, we need to go into the fact that the Adept Chamber of the Moorish Science Temple of America was created to provide the benefit of doubt for our people. And it allows us to create things like Moorish Law Services, Moorish News Media, because in effect, the power of the Grand Sheik is such that it should be directed to the effect of helping the people. And so the Moorish Science Temple of America was ultimately set up and created as sanctuary for our people. The blood on the doorpost, this is the sanctuary this is the blood on the doorpost, taking out your nationality card to proclaim your nationality, and this administration has been heavily active in the courts to do just that. So I believe the prophet made the statement within the divine warning to go to those that know the law, and they will be glad to render you a favorable reply. So the question is, well, what is the inquiry? We have to get something for us. There's been a state and a state left for us. These are the things that the Prophet Noble Ali had envisioned. He was a visionary, so he was able to see that the protection would be needed and it would be necessary. And he was also aware of the foes and what they would try to do to cover things up, what relates to what was left.
Absolutely. Grand Sheik, what makes the Moorish Science Temple of America as a body politic? What makes it an extension of the Adept Chamber? Because I do understand
let me
that
explain
blood on the
it.
doorpost.
Let me
Go
explain
into
it.
that a little
The
deeper.
Adept Chamber is within the Moorish Science Temple of America. It is the court. It's the court of the Moorish Science Temple of America. So let me explain it like this.
So you're the brainchild of Moorish Law Services,
which was created for the purpose of protecting the Moorish interests, just like the Anti-Defamation League for the Jewish community.
Okay, I get that.
So it was necessary to do that because after the Prophet Noble Ali made his transition, it was like that myth when you hear about Osiris or Osar, when he was laid down into the chest and as a gift that was given to him by his brother Set, and how the 72 conspirators rushed to the coffin to slam it shut. Well, so in much in the same vein, the foes rushed to try to sabotage.
Grand Sheik, give us a civic background of and history of the Moorish Science Temple of America.
The Moorish Science Temple of America is set up as a body politic as opposed to a general not-for-profit. So understand the difference is that the religious corporation or the body politic, religious society, operates with a certain amount of autonomy, which means that the Grand Sheik is in effect the head of that particular state. So the Moorish Science Temple of America is one of the few entities in the world that represents the political interests of a nation of people who have not necessarily been designated to a particular tract of land. So it's possible for you to be locked out of your own estate while you're physically in existence if you're not in the proper form or if you're not in the proper position. So the situation as such is the birthrights had to be secured and held in trust until we became mentally competent enough to fulfill our responsibilities to society.
So when did it become necessary, Grand Sheik, to sue, to actually to exercise that power to sue, the temple? Because
Well, just to give a brief,
protection, I do understand when you said the protection that's provided by the temple in an intelligent tone, sometimes things occur and you have to protect the temple and its members. So what occurred whereas the temple began to use its power to sue?
well,
At what point?
what occurs is when you go into our lessons, it teaches us that law governs all events. So the law that governs the event as it relates to the Moorish Science Temple of America having the capacity to sue is the Religious Corporation Act.
When did it become necessary?
Well, it became necessary when we found out through research that certain things had been hidden. Everything that as it relates to the Moorish Science Temple of America as a trust had been pretty much sifted from the surface. Any opportunities to gain access to camping ground or burial ground has not been widely known by the members. The access to the birthrights that's listed on the nationality card has not been accessed by the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. COINTELPRO has put certain operatives in place to dumb the members down and to keep them from understanding the lessons from the trust perspective. In fact, it reads at the top of our Circle 7 Holy Koran, the divine instructions from the Holy Prophet. So we were supposed to take these lessons and ingest them from the trust perspective. And as a family, by it being a family affair with ills and bays, that's the standard for you to receive the birthright. So you were not supposed to just get a paper card from a location that has no nexus to the body politic. A location where a mortgage is being paid, where the property is supposed to be properly indexed under the Moorish Science Temple of America, with the filing system that's set up within what was known as the Recorder of Deeds office, as far as where you go and index properties. Like, have you asked yourself, someone that's extremely wealthy, what process would they go through to purchase a property to dwell in?
Grand Sheik,
Islam.
can you talk about, that's a good question to ask someone. The trust is another form of protection, and the temple is also a trust. You mentioned, Grand Sheik, can you tell us about the Torrance registry system, a system that was put in place, and how that shift came about with the Non-for-Profit Act, the Religious Corporation Act, and how the Torrance registry system is used to index members. Can you talk about that Religious Corporation Act and that
Sure.
Torrance registry
There
system?
was a reason
Grand
why
Sheik?
Islam Sheikhs, there was a reason why the transition was made from the General Not-for-Profit Corporation Act to the Religious Corporation Act. And this is because we would no longer be under the jurisdiction of the state of Illinois. And operating through the Religious Corporation Act would afford us the opportunity to exercise the proper autonomy, which means that we are in control of our own affairs as a religious government. So what had to be retraced is the fact that the founder, Prophet Noble Ali, made a transition from the General Not-for-Profit Corporation Act, because you would not be able to index the members the way you would under the Religious Corporation Act, the way the system was set up. When you you can go online and look it up. Even now, it's currently under the clerk of the county. So there's a website that's similar to the way it was set up under the Recorder of Deeds, Registrar of Torrance Titles. So understand that the Registrar of Torrance Titles and the Recorder of Deeds was a dual office.
Why is it important? Shared by the county, the Cook County, two offices in that same now.
Well, the Torrance registry system had been in effect during the time that the Prophet filed document 10105905. So the Torrance registry system is set up as a registration system for large tracts of land. And this is something that had been used in different countries like Australia and over in Europe and England. And so this is usually a system that's a ledgering system that allows you to attach certain individuals to the land. As like when you go, they had it set up where you put the deed in the back of the holy book, if it's a Bible or whatever, and then you would be able to trace the lineage and ownership of that land. And usually done for large tracts of land, the Torrance registry system. So there's a system, it's for 2 weeks, you go in and you have the documentation to put on file. And as long as you have the authority, because remember, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali attended the Pan American Conference several months before. This was in February of 1928. So it was in that arena that he was acknowledged as being able to make such a transfer due to his royal lineage.
I don't want you to take us too deep, Grand Sheik, because I hear where you're going. I want to kind of stay focused right there, because sounds like what you said is that the Torrance registry system was in place during the time of the Prophet.
Correct.
And that's what the organization was filed under, Cook County Torrance registry system.
Correct.
Now that the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office has been dissolved, basically.
No, it hasn't. It's been absorbed
by the clerk of the court.
Of the county.
The clerk of the county.
Correct.
So it's been absorbed. So does that mean that the members are going to be indexed up under Torrance registry? Because
yes, because
that is the system to index member. Is that correct?
Correct.
Members?
The county has obligation to the system. I believe it was repealed in 1992, but this is long after the obligation was made by the state with regards to the contract that the Prophet drew up, which is document 10105905. So that set up a situation where you had a ledgering system. When you research the Religious Corporation Act, it makes a reference to 10 acres that can be claimed by any entity or body politic that's organized.
Is that still in effect, that law?
That is still in effect. You have a trust system that's set up where property is ledgered. So then you could basically put in a trust number rather than the PIN number, which is connected to the tax roll system.
So how do you prove that the Moorish Science Temple of America as a trust, that it is in fact a trust?
Well, it
because
could
at
actually
some
be
point
looked
the
up.
proof had to come forward.
It actually can be looked up, and it was due to this administration's hard work and efforts that it was discovered. Because the first part is when we saw, and this is what also made it necessary to sue, when we saw that there was a fraudulent copy of 10105905 with none of the seals on there that was being utilized and circulated within the various temples, irregardless to the leadership or the affiliation. So none of the Moorish leaders who are operating had the actual document that actually, when you go down to Recorded Deeds office, is on microfiche. So they had to actually get the microfiche to begin to reproducing the document itself, because the document had been pretty much hidden. No one was aware, none the wiser, until you yourself, Sheikas, actually went down there and made a request. And at that time, they had to actually order it from the warehouse. And
Absolutely,
it took like 2 to 3 days to get the documentation.
You are so correct. I'll never forget that day. In fact, it was one of the most important days of my life, because I was looking to find something so that I could soothe my brain, because I had
Well, recall you were there.
Let me finish my thought. I have to have proof that this estate, this present Moroccan Empire, is in fact the estate of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that was mentioned in our Holy Bible. Okay, and then here comes a prophet to bring us the deeds to our vast estate, the keys, and it's been proven. Grand Sheik, we have less than a minute left, and I appreciate the knowledge that you're imparting on us, and I do understand that we're in a very, very critical moment in our lives. And right now, we're the only administration with cases pending currently in courts dealing with the trust and trust property and indexing our members up under this trust. When we come back, Grand Sheik, we're going to talk about indexing the members up under the trust and the current pending actions in court. Stay tuned with us. We love you with the love that will never die. And make sure you get your protection. Put that blood on that doorpost, because nationality is surely the order of the day and your protection. Thank you once again, Grand Sheik. Stay tuned for part 2 of Blood on the Doorpost.
Part 3.
Returning, part 3, correction.
I was in a restaurant on this particular day. A waiter walked up to me. I'll take your order, he say. Let me recommend our special.